Hi, everybody. It looks like we are live. Welcome to the Betsy Freeman Booking Show, and thanks for bearing with us. We're just a few minutes late. We had some rigmarole to contend with, and Maya was planning for all of you being here, and this is a really important topic. We're calling this show "Quick Tricks to Help Calm Anxiety," and we've never had more occasions to think about how to stay calm probably than in the last 2 years. But even before COVID happened, anxiety was a topic that a lot of us were dealing with and thinking about and talking about and learning about and in therapy for. And so I'm going to ask Maya first to introduce herself and talk about why she wanted to be part of this show. And then we'll go to Julie and then to Princess Maya.
You're making me very anxious right now because I'm trying to share it to my page. But that's
Julie,
okay,
it's okay. Julie can go. Julie could go first.
Julie, go first, and then I'll share it to my page.
Okay, because I can't find how to share it to my page yet either. So, so I'll go first.
It's tricky, isn't it? That's okay.
I think that Betsy had told me what some of the subjects were that we were all going to be talking about in future shows. And pardon me, when she mentioned the anxiety, quick tips and tricks, to overcome anxiety, it just so happens that for maybe the last 5 years, I've been following a group that teaches things called Shalom My Body, and little things about how your brain works and how to calm yourself. And so I thought, well, I could maybe help a few people and have this discussion about the little funny little tips and tricks that you can do to calm yourself in either general anxiety situations or in specifically pointed, focused anxiety situations.
So you have to unmute yourself, Betsy. You're muted.
Thank you. Julie, I went ahead and shared the live stream to your profile for you so that your friends should be able to see it now, and your friends of friends, I think. Okay, Princess, please tell us about how I think that you are the one that brought up the topic of anxiety originally, and part of the reason we're doing this show today is because you mentioned it as a topic you wanted to talk about. So take it away.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Princess. I am a television host and a producer, and especially in my line of work, anxiety is just kind of the name of the game. And I'm so thankful in a weird way for the pandemic because it forced me to face anxiety, and I'd been dealing with it since I was a child. And I'm now grateful for that process. Like, I started seeing a therapist, and I started learning different strategies, and even finding out that I was dealing with a mental illness and I didn't realize it. So for me, I feel like, wow, I was able to find so much hope in healing and understand myself so much better through this journey. And for me, I want to share that with other people because I know that I was suffering in silence for 30 years, and I'm sure many other people have been suffering for as long, if not longer. And I just want to be a part of helping people, feel set free and, learn to embrace the anxiety that we've been ashamed of for so long. So yeah,
that's so good, Princess. Thank you. I just forgot what I was going to say. That must have been I don't know if that was anxiety related, but thank you. We'll go to Maya to introduce yourself last, and we'll come back to whatever flew out of my.
Hi everyone. I work in the field of mental health, so I've worked with people who have anxiety. I work with people around mental health and creativity in treatment centers and with private people. So I've seen a lot of anxiety and learned about where it's coming from and tricks of how to handle it in the moment and long term. On a personal level, you know, it's funny, anxiety is not my biggest problem in life. It's actually trauma. But I think that because I suffered emotional trauma, especially as a kid, my inside system is not capable of handling anxiety very healthy. So when the few times when I do have anxiety, I had two major anxiety attacks in my life, which maybe later on I will share. But whenever anxiety comes up, my instinct response is that I don't know how to deal with it, because I was never given like to self-regulate and to work through it. So I learned as an adult a little bit of how to handle it and how to kind of weather the storm. So so that's why I love this topic. I love any mental health topic. But definitely it's interesting to hear I'm really looking forward to hear what you all have to share too.
Awesome. Yeah, the coping skills, I think the learning the coping skills for anxiety, I mean, that's why we're doing this show the way that we are, is to teach each other some new things. So I know what I was going to say, which was, if you are watching, this topic always brings up a lot of attention and you want to comment. I'm looking at your comments and I'll try to bring in your comments to the discussion. Thank you so much for watching and for caring about us and our story. I'm sure that it's mostly our friends and people already who know us, but maybe some folks that are also been to some of Maia's workshops. So for me, anxiety is generational, but I didn't know that it was generational because nobody said the word anxiety, but it was a physical feeling that I had in certain situations, mostly related to either performance, fear of failure.
She's keeping us on edge. We'll give her a second to to join us back, and if not, we'll go to another topic. And
Anybody said, and that's what I also have, and I can feel it.
Betsy, you were cut off when you started saying that it was never nobody ever said it was anxiety, and then we didn't hear after that. So if you want to just repeat that.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that's interesting is that as a church going person, one of the things you're taught is that you're not supposed to have fear, that that's not from God. And so then sometimes people refuse to acknowledge that they are feeling fear or anxiety because they don't want to admit it. And of course, most people, it's a vulnerable thing to say that you're scared or that you have anxiety. And that just kind of compounds the problem. It does not make it better necessarily. So that's why I didn't know for many years, because, you know, we're brave people in my family. We do all kinds of courageous things. It's just that we also do it while we still feel fear that we probably don't need to always fear. So, yeah, so that is my connection to anxiety. I've noticed that it's a very physical feeling. It could be paralyzing, or, you know, just it can mess with my performance. And I don't like that. So that's why I've always trying to learn new tricks. Alrighty, so y'all wrote some really fantastic questions. And so the first one, we'll go back to the same order for the first one, to Julie first. When was a recent time that you found yourself getting anxious and wished for some small way to calm yourself?
Well, getting ready for today was a little bit, but I think getting ready for my daughter's wedding was a very anxious time. And one of the devices that I tend to fall back on is munching. And that's not a healthy way to handle stress. I think in the 3 weeks leading up to the wedding, I put on about 10 pounds. So it's like, okay, eating is not the right way to handle this. But because of the tricks that I've learned over time, I do box breathing, which is 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 rest. maybe 4 or 5 times. That helps me to center a little bit better. And then there's a couple other things, but sometimes just taking 10 minutes worth of meditation with quiet music, just laying still, just listening to quiet music. And I know sometimes it's hard to even carve 10 minutes out because I'm so busy. I've got so much to do. I'm not going to be able to get ready. But if I take the time to calm, then I'm actually more efficient because then I can really focus on what needs to get done. So the two better things were to spend about 10 minutes just calming, listening to calming music and resting out. And the other one is doing the box breathing, which actually helps you to get into that 10 minutes of calm.
That's really good. Yeah, taking that extra time. For me, it could even be 1 minute or 5, but that is all the difference that you need. Princess.
Yeah, so like I said, I've been dealing with anxiety since I was little. It's like if there's anything you can be anxious about it. But one thing that actually came from my mom's therapist that's been really helpful is just meditating on and saying, I'll do my best. And for me, one of the areas that I feel anxiety most is in performance. I feel like I have to cross every T, dot every I. And, if I don't, then, I'm just afraid of what the outcome is going to be. But since I have started like embracing that, especially in my field of work, there's so much on the line and there's so much stress attached to it, even though there's no life on the line, but it's just, there's a lot of money and there's just a lot of things going on. And it just adds and creates this level of pressure that you always have. And so for me, just thinking about meditating on the fact that I will do my best and giving myself the grace and in not even the grace, but just allowing myself to be human and expecting myself to be human has been really helpful, because now I don't have to feel that same pressure where I have to be perfect. So, and then of course that's easier said than done, but just approaching every project with I will do my best has been really helpful for me when it comes to performance anxiety.
That's great. Thank you. Maya, tell us about a recent incident.
So like I said, I don't usually suffer from anxiety. I have other problem, which is the freeze, fight, flight response. That's mostly my issue. But I've had 2 anxiety attacks in my life. That one was a hypochondria anxiety attack, where I thought I was dying because hypochondria is a mental health thing that I deal with. And I really thought I was going to die. And it brought up a lot of anxiety, as it obviously, logically would, but it was like a very debilitating anxiety where I stopped eating, I couldn't function very well, and took me a while to get out of it, which hypochondria is a whole other topic. Maybe we'll do a different panel on that. But I got out of it by solving my hypochondria. I worked on my hypochondria. And at that time, I did not do it well with the anxiety attack. There was nothing I would do that would. I just lived in anxiety for, it was probably like 6 months, and through working on my hypochondria, I was able to calm down the anxiety, because that was the source was the hypochondria that caused the anxiety. The second one was a trauma attack, a really big trauma attack. That I really had like PTSD, and that brought on anxiety. I know that it's like an added thing, but it's really like made me so anxious, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And that I did try a lot of things. And one thing I learned from anxiety is that you can't think your way out of it. It's a very body thing, body breathing thing, body like nervous system thing. You can't think yourself out of it. The 4x4 box, the box breathing is a very well-known tool, and I highly recommend anybody who never tried it or don't know what it is, just Google it. It will, you can find it on Google. It's very helpful. I know people use it on a daily basis. Like, it's not even for anxiety. It's just to calm your nervous system down. But I tried a lot of things when I had my second attack. The one that worked the most for me was tapping. I don't know if anybody here ever done tapping, when you go like that, because it really like calmed my nervous system down. Yeah. So again, if anybody's interested, just Google it. And also I came across a very very successful book called and website and community from this guy who suffered from anxiety for 20 years and couldn't function, and he finally got himself out of it, and he wrote a book, and the book is called Anxiety No More, and that's like the name of the website. And basically his theory is that you just gotta surrender to the anxiety, and by surrendering to the anxiety, it kind of like goes away. That if you fight it, it's just like fighting against something, a force that you can never win, which I thought was very interesting. And I kind of tried it a little bit, but nervous system things and body things works best for me.
That's great. That's a lot of great information. Who's the author of that book, Anxiety No More?
He's a really awesome dude. I don't remember his name. He's
That's
based
okay.
in the UK. If you just Google it, Anxiety No More website and book, it will show up.
That's fascinating. Yes. So I would say for me, a recent time, it's hard for me to put together one recent time. I mean, I would say anytime I don't like driving in weather. So when I was in Illinois and it snowed about a foot, and then, I let myself be snowed in, and I could let myself be snowed in, thankfully, and we had to have the driveway plowed and all this stuff. But there was a certain point I needed to get on the highway and pick up my friends. And thankfully I was in a Jeep, so I'm like, okay, this is the best possible scenario. Like, but I'm still driving, and I went to get gas, and there's just packed snow, at the gas station, and I think that I have sort of similar things about roller coasters. Like, I will get on them, but I have like this whole thing that I have to do where I'm just like, I've always been okay. I've done this before. There's more plans for me on the other side of this day. And I think I say to myself, this is not what's going to take me out. Like, not, it's kind of like there's movies, what I don't know what movie that is from, or they're like, well, it's not this day, I mean, I felt the same way about COVID. I was like, it's going to take more than a disease like that to get rid of me. Like, you're going to have to try harder, whatever force that is. I don't feel the same way about car things because I have been in some pretty serious car accidents. I have always walked away without a scratch or a broken bone, which is miraculous in itself, because I mean, they're really bad stories, some of them. But I have to say to myself, that I'm not alone. I think that there's forces in the universe that are benevolent for my good, that are more powerful than the forces working against me. Because when you're on the road, I mean, there literally can be actual human people that are mad at you, and I've been driving in Los Angeles for 15 years. So, I mean, I don't know how I've done it, because I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Okay. Recent experiences. Okay. Next question, everybody. How does a feeling of lack of control, create anxiety, either general or specific? And what actions can contribute to a feeling of control and diminish anxiety? Okay, let's go back to Maia first for this one.
Plot twist. Yeah, control is a tricky thing. It's does control gives me anxiety, like lack of control gives me anxiety. It pisses me off. I think the lack of control that gives me anxiety is lack of control of my mental health, of my nervous system, of like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't get anxiety necessarily from like, I mean, I get anxious for sure, but it's not like that debilitating anxiety from like, you know, waiting for somebody to make a decision that I need or something like that, or finding out something. I get very anxious, but you know, not like, I don't see that as an anxiety attack. But I think whenever I'm not in control of my mental health, um, as I shared before, it brings up an anxiety attack. It like I just feel completely like in control of the way I function and my mental health, and you know, just like functioning in that level. And that makes me very that yeah, that brings an anxiety attack. And you know, I didn't realize that until I said it right now. But yeah, I think that's what my anxiety triggers are, is my mental health out of control, because usually I'm very aware of it and it's very in control. Not in
Yeah.
control, I can control it, but I'm very aware of it and I can work alongside it.
That's a really tough one. I mean, and talk about surrendering. I mean, when you know that you don't feel in charge of your own mental health for whatever reason. Yeah, that's I can understand that. Princess?
Yeah, and I think, oh,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Just one line, and I think that it also comes from like mental health. It's so complicated. It's unlike like external things, or that can cause severe anxiety, or physical problems that can cause severe anxiety. um, it's kind of like when I get into those mental health attacks, there's nothing I can do. There's no pill, there's no like tomorrow I'll know the answer, you know, at some point it will go away. It's just like mayhem in my mind.
And that's yeah, that's really tough. Princess.
Yeah, so with me, I deal with OCD specifically, obsessive compulsive disorder. And so I have had to really learn how to make friends with being out of control. And it's similar to the example that Maya brought up earlier. And I always think about being in water, you know, and instead of fighting the waves, kind of letting yourself go with it. And I feel like it's similar with this. My mind naturally wants to find some way to control it, whether it's through repeating some sort of behavior or seeking some sort of reassurance or whatever. But for me, the challenge has been, and the way that's actually been most freeing, ironically, is to embrace that lack of control, to really be open to whatever is going to happen, which of course is easier said than done. But like Maya said, it is a wave, you know, you just allow yourself to experience it. Allow yourself to experience that anxiety, let it peak, and then it'll, you know, like a wave, it'll recede. So for me, instead of trying to get rid of it and trying to find a way to have some type of control, because sometimes you can't, you know. For me, I have flight anxiety. I'm not a pilot. Even if I was a pilot, you know, that's a situation where I literally have to surrender control, and embrace whatever is happening. So, and similar, like you said, Betsy, just knowing that for me, I have a faith in God. So for me, just trusting that whatever is going to be is the best thing. But yeah, for me, it's all about embracing the fact that I'm not in control and letting that anxiety peak, and then allowing that anxiety to descend. So letting it build up and then letting it go away, and just going with that anxiety wave.
Good. Yeah, it's not that we're not gonna ever feel the feelings. Like the feelings are gonna come back, but we learn how to endure the feelings without letting them push us to a state where we are so out of control that we're not, you know, behaving in the best manner, or, you know, not taking care of ourselves as well as we could. Hopefully. Julie, thought.
Well, this I learned many years ago. This is just a process that I use. But when my children were young at home, our family and our household was always about to blow up any moment. And it was because of dad being an alcoholic and the kids being out of control because of that, and mine not knowing how to deal with all of that, and mine trying to keep everything under cover. And so so I had more generalized anxiety just from sun up to sundown. And it wasn't something that was a specific item. And one of the things that I had learned, and my sister, who has a master's degree in early childhood development and special education, taught me this, is that I would take, after I got the kids all in bed and everything goes quiet down, then I would take maybe 15 minutes to do some needlework. And I happened to be doing counted cross stitch at the time, but crochet would work, knitting would work. Because if I took 15 minutes and I worked on that piece that I was working on, even if I only got a half of an inch done, it was something that was totally under my control, which helped me to smooth through all the times that things were out of control. And it lessened my life anxiety to just have the few minutes where I determined exactly what I was going to do. And if I made it, something that I didn't like, or if I made something that would be a mistake, it was my choice whether I was going to rip it back out and do it over, which is the OCD side, or to let it ride and say, you know what, nobody's going to see this one stitch is crooked, so let's just go on. But that was one of the ways that I worked through junior high and high school problems in my household. And at that point, by regaining that little itty bitty piece of control for myself, I was able to deal with that general anxiety.
That's really powerful. I like to knit to feel like I'm accomplishing something, but there's something about being stable. Sorry about the internet weirdness. Did you catch what I said? I don't think I need to go back to that. As a parent, I'm not a parent, but there's a whole different level of kind of anxiety that could develop, right? I was talking to a single friend yesterday, and we were talking about driving, and he said, I hope that my wife someday is willing to teach our children how to drive, because I said, I agree. I think that's terrifying, because then you are not in control. You're trying to teach another person how to operate a vehicle safely. There's a whole other level of like now trying to trust someone with your life. Every time you get in a car where someone else is driving, you got to be willing to trust that, and you've got to be willing to assess, is this person safe? Can I allow this person to drive me somewhere? Or should I try to take away their keys? Or should I, those kinds of situations we find ourselves in have real life serious consequences. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're equipped with those feelings of anxiety, right? Where you go, oh, here's a warning sign. I don't think that guy should be driving right now. So I'm not going to get in the car with him. I've got lots of fun stories about how trusting my instincts has saved my butt in LA. Not just from, physical harm, but from being scammed, being robbed, being, just taken into a bad situation. And I've learned to, when I overrule those instincts, that is at my own cost. Okay, next question. Thank you all. That was a really awesome. Okay. Oh yeah, but I do want to talk about the control thing a little bit more before we go on to the next question. I don't believe in control. period. I don't like the word. I don't like how we emphasize it in our culture, in Western American culture, especially at work. I was told one time when I was supervising someone, and I was told by my boss, this person's out of control, control her. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that because that person is a human being and I don't control people. That's not how I operate. And I don't think that even God himself operates in a spirit of control. I don't like it when people say that God is in control. I think that God is sovereign and in charge. I think he gives us authority over our own lives and our own decision making. I think he could do whatever he wants, but he intentionally gave us decision making power. And so if you really love someone, you don't try to control them. You can take control over yourself. Self control, I guess, is a thing. But I think we just need a better word for it, to be honest. Because when we're feeling out of control, that's not cool. And like we said, sometimes we really don't know how to, there's other forces at work that we don't really know how to do it. So maybe self-control isn't always the best way to say it. Okay. Next question. At what point does nervousness escalate to anxiety, and when does anxiety become unmanageable? What are the roots of anxiety? Anybody want to take that one first? We touched on this a little bit, but Maya?
Yeah, it's related a little bit to, I think, what you just talked about, control. From what I learned from myself and working with a lot of people who have very high anxiety. First of all, I think anxiety is like when you start functioning. Obviously, that's the first line of red flags. Not eating, not sleeping. I know I work in a lot of addiction centers. A lot of people are take drugs or drink to deal with their anxiety. So obviously that's very, very not healthy way to deal with anxiety. But it goes back, and again, it's control and anxiety. I think control is actually sometimes in some ways a defense mechanism for kids who are living in environments that are out of control. So it's important to look at that too and see, what I mean? I work with adults mostly, but I can see why they have control problems, myself included, by the way, why we have control problems, self-control, over-control. And it's mostly related to childhood and learning mechanism that now we're doing them as adults, and they don't work. They worked as now as an adult, they don't work anymore. So if you see somebody over controlling or out of control, I heard somebody once say, I always imagine them as a little kid and seeing like, what are they? And that's usually it. Most of the time comes from that. I think for my experience working with people, because again, I have a lot of issues, but anxiety is not top of the list. Anxiety usually happens when something, and usually, obviously this is generalization, when something bad happened to you, or something abusive, or something that is not, something that causes a lot of anxiety when you were a kid. It kind of stays there, and you learn to react to the world in an anxiety mattering. That's been my experience. That's what I've seen. And like I said in the beginning, I think that the reason I have anxiety whenever I do have it is because I never learned how. Nobody ever taught me how to deal with anxiety or what to do in anxiety, and that anxiety is okay, and that there's healthy ways to deal with anxiety, and and all of that. So I hope that answers your questions. I kind of forgot your question, but I know it was about.
Yeah, well, we were talking about the escalation of, nervousness to anxiety to becoming unmanageable and out of control, which I think is really important. Because for me, and I want Princess to answer this next if you're up for it, but I think for me, there's I think that we learn habits, like you're saying, Maya. We learn habits in what we do to brush off anxiety or nervousness and sort of power through things, or we run away from certain scenarios. Like there's all kinds of different ways. So I don't know when things go from nervousness to anxiety, or when they, to unmanageable, but I do know how to sort of talk myself down. Graham Cook has a really great next step thing. I talked about last year when we did some anxiety thing. Right around this time of year, we talked about performance anxiety, where you just sort of, you can talk yourself down actually through your feelings if it's not too out of control. I think we have ways of trying to double down that work, to manipulate a situation or get through things that usually work in some scenarios, but not every scenario is predictable. So I think that what happens is a lot of times you'll encounter a new situation where your old mechanisms no longer work, and that's when things start to escalate, because there's always going to be a time when you're out of tricks, I think, and all the grounding in the world or the hugs from your friends or something. And so you've got to either learn new methods, or, if you don't find new ways to address and rest and heal, especially from a major trauma. In a major trauma situation, things cannot always be managed in a major trauma situation. You've got sometimes a lifelong healing process, depending on what the trauma is. Princess?
Yeah, so my relationship with anxiety has really evolved. And I used to see it as something to be ashamed of or something to get rid of, like, oh, this is the enemy, I have to get rid of it. But now I'm at a point where I don't see it that way anymore. I see it as this is part of life, and it's okay to experience nervousness, the point where it becomes tricky, like Maya said to me, is for me, it got to the point where I couldn't function. I couldn't leave the house, and then I was afraid to stay in the house, But yeah, I think the first part for me was just allowing myself to experience it and giving myself that permission and not feeling bad about it, not trying to run away from it. And even this is similar thing to control. I feel like control is such it can often be an illusion. I really do feel like, there's so many things where we think we have control, or we can do X, Y, and Z, like we're talking about the car situation. We have no control over what other people do. We have no control over what happens to our own car. We can do all that we're responsible for and able to do, but there's a certain element of control that none of us have. And for me, I think just making, as weird as it may sound, I think just making friends and making peace with anxiety, feelings of anxiety, making peace with not being in control, and kind of just letting them be part of life and not something to run away from, or something that I need to get rid of. And it's interesting, because as I sit and allow myself to feel anxiety and feel those waves that we talked about earlier, I realize that it really does pass. In the past, I felt like I needed to get rid of it. Like, oh, let me find a way to, to like I said, get rid of it. But now it's just acknowledging that, hey, you know what, it's gonna peak. I can feel this. It's gonna peak, and then I'll be able to move on. Like, it's a wave. So I think for me, it was just a matter of, well, not just a matter, but I think the biggest part was just changing the way that I see it. And there are definitely moments when, especially going back to the flight experience, where it just gets really, really hard to manage my symptoms and manage what I'm experiencing. And so in those moments, you do have, meditation, deep breathing, those different types of exercises. But for me, I really had to, at the root of it, I really had to change my understanding and my relationship with these words. And that was just like the first, like the most freeing step in the process. for me personally.
Good. That I think that's huge, is reframing the vocabulary, the way we address it and we speak. Julie?
Yeah, this is a question that there are little things that we do throughout a day that cause us to be nervous about, just, and it's just like am I going to be able to do this thing? And it's just a little tiny thing, and you go, okay, well, that's fine, I can get that done. And then there are other things that, if you don't utilize the self-talk that people, that you've all been kind of talking about, you can do the wrong self-talk, and that nervousness, if you hang on to that little nervousness and then let it grow by saying, oh, I'm scared about this, I don't know, what if I'm going to trip when I do this, what if, and this is partially performance and partially like going to a new place or learning new people or meeting people, and what if they don't like me, and and then, to me, it's unmanageable when you start going through and saying, well, if I do this thing and they don't like me, and somebody else sees me do this thing and they're going to judge me, and now I'm feeling uncomfortable, and well, I guess I think I'm going to be sick, and so I'll just stay home and not do the thing. That's when to me, the anxiety has become unmanageable, because now I'm cutting off my connection with other people because I've given myself this big story. And so, to me, that's the manageable part, and the roots of anxiety. Yes, I totally agree with Maya and with Princess that, it's a learned thing from when you're a very young child. If you've lived in an uproarious upbringing, and you never know when somebody in the family is going to haul off and hit you, or if you're going to scream at for something, or if somebody's going to slam a door in your face, or on your hand, or some really horrible thing. It's like you go through life tighter and tighter and tighter. And if you see a person that looks like that person later on as an adult, you say, I don't want to meet that person because that person triggers something in me. That's those roots go way, way back to time before, sometimes, when you're 2 or 3 years old and you don't even know that you have those memories. So and when you're really triggered and your right brain's trying to match up with your left brain, and the logic is trying to overcome the feelings, and the feelings are trying to rule, it's it's not a pretty sight. And that's why we need the little tricks at that point.
Absolutely. Well, and with healing, like what Maya was saying about trauma, and what you were talking about, which, these are like, you'd say kind of smaller, a door getting slammed, or getting snapped at, or getting yelled at, or getting, or just, for me, like, I've been dealing with rejection roots a lot. And rejection could be as simple as something, someone just wasn't there when you called, or whatever. And you can make it a lot bigger than it should be because of some other past rejection, that you took really seriously, or, that really hurt you. And so, when you have the time to sit and heal and process and say, oh, it's because of that happening when I was 12, it's because of this happening when I was 8, that I'm still like really locked in this little girl mindset, and I probably should try to heal that memory. But in the moment, you don't always know. It's just a physical response. Then you're like really hurt for something that later on you're like, well, what was I reacting to? I think that's one of the hardest things about carrying around the anxiety, is that it can sort of come out of nowhere. Okay, so having said that, are there any special ways, and you talked about this, we all talked about it a little bit, what are the special ways that you found to distract yourself, calm yourself, and feel more peace that you'd like to share?
My mom and I were just talking about anxiety yesterday, and she was just talking about a new period of her life that's coming up and her anxiety with it. And we were talking about courage, and I was just sharing with her that for me, in the past, I felt like I needed to wait until I no longer felt nerves or anxiety before I proceeded. And now I've learned that just because you have these feelings doesn't mean that you can't proceed. You can still proceed even with them. And instead of trying to put all my energy into eradicating them and put all my energy into, well, I can't do this because I'm feeling this way. Kind of like what I said earlier, just making peace with that fear, moving forward and knowing that you may still have some feelings of fear, anxiety, and that's okay. And that's, to me, that's what real courage is not, not killing an ant, but sometimes just being able to move forward despite the lion that you're facing in your head, For me, that's been really helpful, is just, like I said, not seeing it as something that I have to always like get rid of in order to move forward, but saying that as sometimes it's a part of life and you're just gonna, or it's just part of the situation, you're doing something new. It's okay, it's normal to feel this way. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. And that doesn't mean that you're incapable. You still move forward despite the anxiety and despite the nerves. So that was something that was really helpful for me. And I think the last time I saw you, Betsy, in person, I was preparing to go skydiving. We were talking about it, and I did it. I did it. I was nervous the entire time, but I did it. And I feel like so much of life is that you don't know the outcome. And instead of trying to get rid of your nerves and say, oh, I can't do it until I don't feel nervous, you do it even with your nerves, bring them along with you. And it's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Congratulations. I have backpedaled and stepped out of any desire or interest that I had in skydiving. That is how I have chosen to deal with it. But I commend you all for doing the courageous things. And there are many things that are actually in some ways scarier for me that I have made myself do. And so I do think, face your fears. Maia.
Yeah, Princess, I think you just won the prize of anxiety. Like, you're the winner. Let's see. I think on an anxiety level, I found that walking helps me. I know it sounds very basic, but it's kind of like I just walk and breathe deeply, just like get my body moving, not like in an athletic way, but just like, feel the, it's like a mindfulness. It's like a mindfulness mix with somatic, kind of like smell the air, feel the air, feel the ground. A lot of that helped me. Meditation definitely helps me. Of course, it's very hard to meditate when you're in the middle of anxiety. But in the middle of anxiety, it is a lot of time nervous system things that help me. It's like just doing things to calm my nervous system down. And I do, as Princess was thinking, I was actually thinking that, whenever before I go on stage to speak or to do a workshop, I always feel very nervous. And I'm learning to, again, like she said, to just like go like, just step into it because it's just there. And I know that once I start it, and definitely when it ends, it won't be there again. So I'm just like, it's almost kind of like surfing, kind of like just hop on, and I take a step into it, and I don't like it, but I take a step into it, and I just just move forward.
That's good. That's powerful. Julie, what are some ways you found to calm yourself?
Well, I've learned a few little nervous system type things from Dr. Jim Wilder, and he is associated with a couple of different groups. One is called Life Model Works, and the other one is called Thrive today. And they're little things they've learned over the years, the Shalom My Body exercises, excuse me. And like Maya talked about the tapping, and one of them is you tap here because it does something to increase the activity of your vagus nerve and calms you down. And as you breathe in, you try to tap at your heart rate. And then as you breathe out, you just rub gently, and then you repeat a mantra. And the mantra that they use is, when I feel afraid, I will trust in you, O God. And so they do that. You do that 3 or 4 times until you feel a little bit more. They do another one where you can have a startle response or an anger response, which is like a startle response. If you've ever seen a little tiny baby, the startle response is like that. And then they do that, and then they come back down, or you do the anger thing. And then as you relax that, then you repeat the mantra. And another one that they use is yawning, because something about yawning also activates that vagus nerve. And so you look to the right and you do a big yawn, and then you come back and you repeat the mantra, and then you go to the left, and you do that about 4 times. And all of those things, for me, they have worked well. Sometimes you have to do all of them in order to de-escalate. But those are some of the things that I have learned. And there are things where, like, if you're in a situation where you're not ready to go for a walk, or if you're in a situation where you just really can't quite own what's going on around you, you can at least take 2 minutes and get that done, and kind of keep your, it helps you to get on the surfboard and ride the top of that wave back down when you've hit that peak. It makes that peak a little bit lower and gets you down a little further.
Those are really good. Thank you. I think I found for me, just something simple like washing my face. Like I realized even more in the last couple of years that some of my stuff was so deeply rooted that it was really self-abandonment. And so I've done a lot of work just to try to re-accept myself, and there's this level of disconnect that can happen where I start to feel kind of invisible. I'm like not sure if I am actually still here. Like if you spend a lot of time around people all day, and if you go to the post office in Los Angeles, it's some post offices, but you can stand in line for 20 minutes. And when it gets to you, then they try to skip you. And I'd be like, oh my God, not only have I been in this line for 20 minutes, it came to me and they don't even know I'm here. So that's really just having like a moisturizer routine, or or just sitting in with my hand over my heart and going, okay, even if everybody else abandons you, I won't abandon me. I'll be here. I'll comfort myself. Even if there's nobody here to give me a hug, I'll make sure that I get a cookie. I'll make sure that I get some ice cream. Those are my coping mechanisms. Okay. They're probably not going away. I'm going to eat to comfort myself probably for the rest of my life. And I'm not going to feel bad about it, but not until I get sick or anything. And light a candle, stretching really helps. Sometimes dancing for short periods of time when no one can see me. Those are my quick tricks. Clock. Do y'all want to end here, or we want to take one more question? You good to go? One more? All right, let's do one more. Okay. Is anxiety a permanent part of some people's personality, or can it be healed? I want to know what all of you think. Julie?
Well, boy, you really put me in the hot seat there. There's a lot of newer brain science that's come out in the last 30 years. And I've been kind of following Dr. Caroline Leaf, and she knows a lot about the physiology of the nervous system. And she very strongly, more than suggests, she strongly believes that people can be healed. It does not have to be permanent. Even though there are childhood traumas and there may be something, a generational DNA type, inheritance or whatever, but she really strongly feels that you can be retrained, and that you can grow new dendrites and learn new patterns in your brain, and through self-talk and things like that. And I believe in healing. I believe that God can heal us. I believe that there's at some level, if it's, and God uses other people to help us heal. So when you're going to a counselor, or when you're going to a training or something like that, God can be using that person to help you heal yourself. But at the same time, there are occasions where God will just miraculously turn the switch on something and turn something off. Now, not many people really are able to experience that, but there are a few who have, and you can't deny that they've had this huge healing. But I definitely believe people can be healed, and it's not something that you're shackled with, that you have to have for the rest of your life. And there's a way out. I really think so.
Maya, what do you think?
Well, I think that thank God I'm alive now and not 70 years ago. I don't think I would be able to survive 70 years ago the way I was brought up in my nervous system. Yeah, I don't think you completely make everything go away, because the childhood has already happened and the wiring happened and your nervous system, happened. And but I definitely think, like Julie, that you can definitely heal and make something that maybe shut you down for 6 months now last a day. And you can just move on with your life. I've seen it on myself. I experience things now that 20 years ago would shut me down completely, and now I'm like, oh, this is very uncomfortable, and I'm going to take care of me today for the next few hours, and then the next day I move on with my life. I'm really happy with what's going on in mental health right now, which is we're understanding that it's an integrative healing approach. It used to be only talk therapy. That's pretty much what you got. And we're realizing now that there's many different ways and many different points that you have to approach healing. And anxiety and trauma are definitely a nervous system response. So it's not a mind thing, it's a nervous system thing. And I recommend anybody who suffers from anxiety or trauma or anything that kind of makes you feel like it's like it happening from your neck down, to research and find read and find therapists that do somatic work and nervous system work. A lot of the things that Julie showed, those are somatic exercises, which is great, and they work, and they're very simple, and they're the weirdest stuff ever, but they literally like reset your nervous system. I do Kundalini yoga. It's another big one that I do. It's all nervous system. Yes, I definitely think it can be healed in the way that it's just something you deal with, just like you have a headache one day and you go like, you don't get shut down for 6 months. You just take a Tylenol and you just go to bed and you wake up the next day and you're fine. On the same level, that it's it's a process.
That's good stuff. Princess.
Yeah, I do agree. I do think that it can be healed, and I think that process looks different for everyone, and everyone's situation is so unique. For some people, it is I believe that God can definitely take something away, but I think for some others, it might be to Maya's point, it might be just, it's no longer crippling. And for me, I had to I had to start taking medication and in addition to therapy. And it was a combination of both that's been able to help me get to the point where I still have those anxious, intrusive thoughts, but they don't trouble me the way that they used to. They get smaller and smaller. And for me, I think that's healing too. I think that counts as well. So yeah, I do think that, and I also agree with Dr. Carolyn Leaf. I know that Julie, you brought her up, and part of what we do in talk therapy is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically retraining those neural pathways that you talked about. So I think it's a combination. There might be some people whose personalities or genetics or just whatever they grew up with may make them more prone to those types of issues and dealing with it more than some others. But I definitely believe it's not, it's not the end of the world. It can be eradicated altogether, or it can be, just decreased to the point where it's not crippling, like I said. And I know that that's what I experienced during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic. It got to the point where my anxiety and everything was crippling. And now it's at the point where, I know that these thoughts are going to come and it's okay. It's not the end of the world. I can still move forward and live and enjoy my day despite the intrusive thoughts. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think you definitely can be healed.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you to all of you for being so vulnerable and open and sharing so many wonderful things. I agree with Julie about Jim Wilder. She actually shared his book with me on a church retreat in 2020, which was really wonderful. I highly recommend his book, Restored. He calls himself a neurotheologian. I also highly recommend a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which a lot of people in my family, Dr. Bessel Vander Kolk, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. I believe he's Dutch, but really excellent about recovering from trauma and helping, being observant, like you said, healing happens in community with friends and family, trusted professionals. There was a point where I felt like the Lord really showed me, just pay attention to people's facial expressions, pay attention to their body language. If you want to help someone feel less anxious and more secure, it takes time to get to know a person. You cannot always find a quick fix for them, but you can care about them and you can learn over time how to help them feel safe. And we can all do that. I think for me in the pandemic, I think anxiety is healable, but I think that we've got many different latent fears that can exhibit themselves at different times and cause anxiety. And for me, there was a real serious fear of death, which is like, that's the ultimate, right? It's more than anxiety, but I think that I had to face that and overcome it in a real way in this last couple years and say, well, look, I am going to die. So, okay, how can I stop having this terror when I think that might be a possibility? Because I don't think that death is real. Ultimately, I don't think there's any such thing as a final end of life, but that's another mystery for another day. But just to say, as we go through life and face these different enemies, these invisible enemies, I do think that healing is always available. And I think talking about our fears is the first way to really get true healing. So having said that, thank you all so much for everything you shared. Thank you to everyone who watched. No one made any comments, but I could see there were people consistently watching all through the show, and that makes us feel great. So feel free to let us know what you thought, and to follow us. Please feel free, all the guests, to post any links that you'd like to share with our guests, anything that they could benefit from further reading. Maia's got workshops especially for creatives that she does online too, if you want to get through some of your creative blocks. And please come back on the show again. Next week, we're going to be talking about growing to maturity. And my guests are David Brooks, David McNelly, and Wendy Hibbard. So please tune again next week. And thank you, Maya. Thank you, Julie. And thank you, Princess.